Hello and welcome to the Working Tools Masonic Podcast, where today will be part 2 of our interview with Illustrious Brother Al Jorgensen, the Sovereign Grand Inspector General for the Orient of Washington.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our opinions and thoughts are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions, either here on YouTube or on our Facebook page. We'd also appreciate a thumbs up and especially any comments on our videos.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast will be part 2 of our interview with Most Worshipful and Illustrious Brother Al Jorgensen, who in addition to being past Grand Master of the Masons in Washington, is also currently the Sovereign Grand Inspector General for the Scottish Rite in the Orient of Washington. Illustrious Sir, thank you for coming out to our podcast.
Again, it's my pleasure to be here with you.
I noticed you changed we're getting serious now, you've changed your background to the House of the Temple there, is that?
I just kind of wanted to remind us we were going to talk about Scottish Rite since the last time we were primarily in the Blue Lodge area, but the executive chamber of the Supreme Council of Southern Jurisdiction at the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C.
Excellent. Do you get to go there once a year or something as you're to perform your duties?
Yeah, biennial sessions. That means once every 2 years, and we meet in August of the odd number of years. So hopefully, if the pandemic thing slows down a little bit, and then we can travel more freely, we'll have our sessions in the last weekend in August of 2021.
Yeah, I noticed on the website it said the offices are open, but the building for tours is closed, which is unfortunate, but things you have to do in these years.
It's a great facility down there. Every time I see getting off track here, but every time I see they show the outside of the Supreme Court building when they're talking about the Supreme Court nominee, I think the same architect that did that building did the House of the Temple. It's a great edifice down there. So I guess my question is, what does it mean to be Sovereign Grand Inspector General? What are your duties? What do you do?
Well, by statute, not to go on an ego trip or anything like that, but by statute, our statutes say that the Sovereign Grand Inspector General for the Orient has the same general powers as the Grand Master of Masons, but only for Scottish Rite. So my duties essentially evolve around making sure that the valleys that are in the Orient are performing in accordance with the statutes of the Supreme Council, that we are engaging our members, we are pursuing, if you will, Blue Lodge Masons who want to further their Masonic education. Often Scottish Rite is called the University of Freemasonry. We like to think that we have some educational programs that are worthwhile. We have some universities within or colleges within the Southern jurisdiction, as well as throughout the United States and the Northern jurisdiction also. We have training programs that are open not only to Scottish Rite Masons, but to all Masons. The Master Craftsman program is one that you can enroll in. It's now available on the website of the Supreme Council, and so you can do it online if you care to do so. But we challenge our members as we pursue or progress through the degrees of Scottish Rite to explore the lessons of the degrees, the tenets that are expressed in each of the degrees, and how we can better manage and serve mankind and ourselves by adhering to the not only the Scottish Rite Creed, but the lessons that are taught in all phases of Scottish Rite.
And just for those who may not know, what did you alluded to the degrees of Scottish Rite? What's the structure there of the degrees? There's 29 degrees?
Well, actually, there are 32 degrees of Scottish Rite, and there's an honorary degree, a 33rd degree, of course, which is only given to a very select number of brothers of the fraternity. When I say that there are 32, the Blue Lodge degrees are considered part of Scottish Rite. Now, in the jurisdiction or Orient of Washington, we recognize the Blue Lodge as the conferrers of those degrees, and we don't confer the first 3 degrees in the state of Washington or in the Orient of Washington. As far as I know, there's only one Orient in which the Scottish Rite first 3 degrees are conferred and are accepted, and that's in Louisiana. But we do have 29 degrees, and there are 4 bodies within a Scottish Rite Valley: the Lodge of Perfection, the Chapter of Rose Croix, the Council of Kadash, and the Consistory. Now, the Lodge of Perfection are the 4th degree through the 14th degree. And for a brother to progress in Scottish Rite, he must have conferred the 4th degree and the 14th degree, the 18th degree, which is the Chapter of Rose Croix, and the 30th degree, which is the Council of Kadash, and then the 32nd degree, which is Master of the Royal Secret, or the Consistory. Now, we have the capability, if we don't have the membership, by that I mean the number of members, to confer the other degrees, we can communicate those degrees. And communicating them is simply in a seminar format where there is if you will, an instructor or moderator who will provide the synopsis of the degree, the communication of the degree, and then the obligation of the degree. So it's upon the brother then to individually go back and study the lessons of the degree and the themes that are presented in the degree, if he has it communicated to him, rather than having it conferred. We're having a unique thing happening in the Orient of Washington here with regards to the degrees. As I mentioned, the 4th, 14th, 18th, 30th, and 32nd degrees need to be conferred on a new Scottish Rite Mason. But because of the pandemic and the inability to meet as a body, and as much as we're under the jurisdiction of the Grand Master, as well as the Supreme Council of Scottish Rite, we are unable to confer the degrees. Our statutes do provide that in unusual circumstances, and those are in parentheses, in unusual circumstances, the Sovereign Grand Inspector General may communicate those, what we call terminal degrees, those 5 degrees, instead of conferring them. And so we'll be doing that in the Orient of Washington on the 30th and 31st and of October, and the 6th and 7th of November, to about, right now, I think we have in the class somewhere between 35 and 40 brothers that have petitioned the Scottish Rite and will be receiving the Scottish Rite degrees.
It's interesting to hear you talk about the different bodies, and we had virtually, and which will be separated by several weeks here. We just had the Sovereign Grand Commander of Canada on the show, and he was explaining the bodies in Canadian Scottish Rite, that there are actually only 3 bodies, Steve can correct me on that. Do you know why? And maybe Steve would know, or you would know why there's a difference, or how that happened. Is it because of the chartering situation, or how that, I don't know the history there.
I'm not clear as to why there's a difference. I do understand there's a difference. We have the first 14 degrees, which is the Valley of Vernon Scottish Rite. And then you have the Rose Croix, which is up to the 18th degree, and then the consistory goes from 19 to 32.
So, Al, do you know why is there a Kadash? And
Yeah.
do you have any idea?
No, I really don't. And quite frankly, I do know, having observed some degree work in the northern jurisdiction of the United States, their work is different than the southern jurisdiction, and so there's not a uniform ritual, other than the fact that there are the basic lessons and tenets that are conveyed in the degrees of Scottish Rite, and they may be conveyed in different means and fashions than in each Grand Command or Supreme Council. So
I know it's been referred, the southern jurisdictions have been referred to as the mother jurisdiction. Is that just something that the southern jurisdiction says, or is that really true?
of course, that's really true. Actually, the history of the Scottish Rite, the modern Scottish Rite as we know it, was established in 1801 in Charleston, North Carolina, and that was the Supreme Council of the United States. And then I guess approximately, I want to say about 10 years later, somewhere in that time frame, the states, 15 states, and I like to say essentially the states that composed the Union in the Civil War, formed the northern Masonic jurisdiction, and it was recognized as such by the southern jurisdiction. But being the first, the southern jurisdiction is considered the quote mother jurisdiction of the world, and so I think that's where that comes from. But yeah, we like to tout that, and everybody remember that where we started from.
I think Right Worshipful Brother Moises Gomez was on the show a while back, and he's a member of the northern jurisdiction. I think he referred to the Mason-Dixon line as kind of being the division, if you will, between northern and southern, and then the southern just kind of amalgamated the west, if you will.
Yeah, I think the northern Masonic jurisdiction was formed before the Civil War, though, wasn't it? In my head, it was.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
My only my allusion there is just simply that the states that composed the Union, for the most part, were the states that
it's like
as the northern jurisdiction.
Yeah, it always struck me as funny that there's only a couple states further north than Washington is. The fact that we're in the southern jurisdiction always struck me. That's like, what is it, east of the Mississippi and north of the Ohio or something like that?
Well,
anyway.
It's interesting also on the Prince Hall side, which we recognize, the northern jurisdiction. Washington is in the northern jurisdiction of Prince Hall on the Prince Hall side.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Moises also referred to the northern jurisdiction actually, in most past years, had more membership, even though it was significantly smaller. But now he said the numbers are very close, or maybe the southern has overtaken slightly.
Don't know.
Although he is a historian, so he knows everything.
Yeah.
When do you and this is one of the things that, and I don't mean to lean on your dates and figures and facts, but one of the things that impressed me when we first met as a Mason, that I lovingly say that he talked about so many dates and times and people and places, and I didn't remember any of it after our first meeting. But do you know, when did Washington become part of the southern jurisdiction, and was there a petition process, or how did Washington become part of the?
No, that's a good question, David. I'll have to take that and get back to you, because I don't know exactly how that all came about.
I stumped him. Look at that.
Without fair warning. So, but I will get back to you on that. And you can, the next time you have a working tools, you can interject what we find out and what we pass to you about that.
Listeners, this is why we don't tell our guests the questions before we have them on the show.
So, in general, does it do states, well, now with all of them are in except Puerto Rico, I guess, is there a process? Do you know, is there a process of, if there was a new state, that they would become, or is there a process for a southern to defect us, I guess, to the north, or vice versa? How would a state become? Is there maybe there isn't a process because it's all happened.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much that way. We are continuing to recognize. In fact, we just had an informal session of the Supreme Council via Zoom here this last week, and the Grand Commander announced that we had recognized Romania, the Supreme Council of Romania. So there's a new Supreme Council there. However, we have not recognized for amity France, and of course France has been around a long time, but we've had a number of issues with regards to masonry in regards to recognition of bodies in France, and consequently we don't have a good feel yet as to which body we want to recognize over there, which Supreme Council. But so with respect, you mentioned Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is an Orient within the Supreme Council, and I have a counterpart, Sovereign Grand Inspector General for Puerto Rico, and so he's part of the Southern Jurisdiction, as is Guam and China, so and Japan. They're in Southern Jurisdiction. So.
You know, it's interesting that the Rainbow Girls are active in Romania as well. There's a Grand Assembly of Romania. Is Romania? I know not very little about Eastern Europe. Is Romania a hotbed of masonry, or is it just sort of coincidence? Or
well, I'm not sure. Maybe next time you have Most Worshipful Brother Jim Mendoza on, because he's the expert in the Orient, in the jurisdiction of Washington as well as the Orient of Washington relative to Masonic
recognition.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll have to have a show on masonry in Romania. We'll have to find us a guest.
So here's a good question for you. As we learned earlier about the charitable side of the Scottish Rite in Canada, does the Scottish Rite in the Southern Jurisdiction support a particular charity or anything like that?
I'm so glad you asked. The answer to that is yes, of course. And within the Orient of Washington, we have two really outstanding charities. The Supreme Council allows each Orient to support the main theme of their charity. Now, there are two, as I mentioned, in the Orient of Washington. One is our Scholarship Foundation, and actually, for a small Orient, in as much as we have somewhere just under 3,000 Scottish Rite Masons in the Orient of Washington, we annually give somewhere between $450,000 and $500,000 in scholarships. This last year, we awarded 120 scholarships, $3,000 scholarships to students pursuing a baccalaureate degree within the state of Washington. And we had some 20 fellowships, which are $6,000 fellowships, which are awarded by universities here, which we fund, so we're very proud of our scholarship program.
Pardon my lack of knowledge. What's a fellowship?
Fellowship is somebody that's pursuing an advanced degree, and they need money to pursue that either for research or whatever their costs might be in pursuing that higher degree.
That's fantastic.
The other philanthropy is speech and language pathology. And we have each of our valleys in the Orient of Washington, with the exception of one, have either a clinic or a program that they sponsor. The difference being a clinic is where you actually have staff members pathologists on staff in a clinic that is fully supported by the valley. And we have those located in Bremerton, Spokane, and in Walla Walla. The others are where we have contract operations. The valley contracts with the pathologists in the local area to provide the service to the young child. And we utilize the contractors' facilities and all that, so we don't have any fixed costs associated with that, only the costs associated with providing the service. We annually spend on the order of about $1 million to support that particular endeavor across the state. But again, the valleys are prime on that with respect to providing the funding to either support their clinic or to support their program. The children enrolled in the program must be between the ages of 2 and 7, because it's important to catch them at a young age, the formative years, so that they can progress with their peers as opposed to being left behind and always catching up. The other part of the program that I think is probably key is the parents have to be a part of the program. By that I mean they have to attend the sessions with their child. And when they're not in session with the pathologists, the parents then become the pathologists, if you will. And so the parents have an instructional program that they go through in order to assist their kids as they're going through the program. And this is something that's been going on in the state of Washington now for over 35 years. And we're very proud of it. And the unfortunate thing is that we've identified, about 5 years ago, we identified that we had about 30,000 children in the state of Washington that needed the service, and were not receiving it either from us or from their school districts or other means, insurance, etc. So there is a need out there, and we're trying to garner the additional funds we need to grow the program. But there's a lot of need for charitable funds out there, as we all know now, and so it's a challenge, and we're working it.
Well, that's definitely one of a worthy charity, and if there's a brother out there who's looking to find something to support, whether it be now or bequeathed, I'm sure you could direct it in that direction. I know our Scottish Rite Charitable Foundation in Canada has recently received several bequeathings, large sums donated to the funds that get invested for these programs. And so, yeah, that's pretty cool. Nice programs to have in place.
Just out of curiosity, well, two questions. First, how many valleys are there? Not about, I'm sure you know exactly. How many valleys are there in the Orient of Washington?
In the Orient of Washington, there are 13 valleys. And
13, all right.
So we've got, I can go through them. There's Bellingham on the north, and of course Everett, and I think you ought to be familiar with that. Then Seattle, Bremerton, Tacoma, Olympia, Kelso, Vancouver. We move across the mountains, and we've got Wenatchee, Yakima, and Kennewick, then over to Walla Walla, and then up to Spokane. So we're pretty well covered the entire state. The eastern side is a little bit less sparsely covered, but again, their population over there is substantially less than it is on the west side of the state. So, and again, the valleys that do not have an active program right now, well, the only one is Kelso.
So, this is one of the cool opportunities that everybody gets on our show is that our stuff is online for a long time to come. And if there's any message that you want our listeners to hear about the Scottish Rite, or anything in particular, now would be a great opportunity to get that message out.
Well, thank you. That's fantastic. The Scottish Rite, of course, is an adjunct to the Blue Lodge, and as such, we hold allegiance to the Blue Lodge and to the Grand Master in the particular jurisdiction in which we reside. But to every Blue Lodge Mason, there is an opportunity to pursue what is termed the higher degrees. However, there is no higher degree, as we all know, than the third degree. But for additional lessons and knowledge in helping you to build your personal edifice, Scottish Rite provides an educational platform to do that. Certainly, the York Rite, in their degree structure, provides many of the same lessons that we do in a different format and in different means. There is a particular bent in many of the York Rite degrees having to do with the Christian religion, whereas in the Scottish Rite religion, we tend to incorporate lessons from all the religions, major religions of the world. And as such, I would encourage any Blue Lodge Mason that has an interest in pursuing further knowledge in our fraternity to contact the nearest valley. And you can find them by going on either the Grand Lodge or the Scottish Rite website for the Orient of Washington, or each of the valleys in the state of Washington has their own website. And if all else fails, go on the Supreme Council website, and they'll direct you to the valley closest to you for obtaining information and pursuing a career in the Scottish Rite.
For those in your jurisdiction, what's that website address? Because that should get a good plug.
Well, I think if you Google Scottish Rite Washington and make sure it's not Washington, D.C., we sometimes get confused on that one, but Scottish Rite Orient of Washington, you will get to the Orient of Washington website.
Excellent. And I'm sure David will make sure that we have it for our write-ups when we post things, and we'll be happy to share that.
Perfect. Appreciate that very much.
And not to speak after the illustrious brother has spoken, but I want to re-mention something that he mentioned earlier. The Master Craftsman program, I personally found to be really helpful. It actually, I did all three of them a few years ago. I guess they rearranged some of it since then, but it helped me personally to sitting down, writing some of those essays, really digested some of the lessons of the Scottish Rite and actually kind of changed my opinion on some things that I had sort of held my opinion on when it says, what do you think about issue X and Y? And I sort of went, well, why do I think that? And there's a really, it's going to sound hokey, but I honestly do feel that I grew in I grew doing this program. And if you take it seriously and you engage the program as it's meant to be, I really think it's an outstanding opportunity. And I really recommend it to like you said, all Masons are eligible for it. It's really great.
It's an ideal program to do the very things you talked about. It is broken down so that one of the sections of the degree or of the course now deals with the first 3 degrees of Masonry, which of course is going to be more general than what you would get with regards to specifically dealing with the work in the state of Washington, but it deals with the basic tenets of Masonry. The next one deals with the Scottish Rite degrees and goes into each of those in depth. And the last one the second one actually deals with the history of the Scottish Rite and the degree structure, and then the last one deals with the lessons of each of the degrees. And I like the term that the first one I thought was kind of like an undergraduate course, instructional course. And the last 2 I thought were almost like graduate level courses. The amount of writing that you had to do and the in-depth research and that sort of thing in developing it. So it's not an easy course, but it is the work that you put into it. As Matt said, I think makes you grow in your understanding the fraternity and what we're all about.
Yeah, and those who do decide to venture into Scottish Rite, if you don't have the opportunity provided for that type of education, get involved, because a lot of the education actually comes to you from being involved and participating in the delivery of education and degrees and conferrals and so on, and suck up all that extra knowledge, because there's some pretty cool lessons to be learned, and as you can progress through it. I totally enjoy that part of it.
You hit on something there that Brother David hit on while he was district deputy, and some of the presentations that he made, that the importance of our ritualistic work and doing it and learning it and making it your own. And when you've done that, you've made it your own, and you can convey it as part of you. It helps you become the individual that our fraternity wants you to become. And that was something that he emphasized on more than one occasion, I remember, and it really struck a chord with me.
Most definitely.
And so, unfortunately, we're about reaching the end of our time together here this evening. So, on behalf of David Colbeth and Stephen Chung and myself, illustrious Brother Al, thank you very much for coming on our show this evening.
It's been a real pleasure for me. I've enjoyed meeting you all. Matt, I've met you before. David, I know you quite well. And Stephen, it's I hope that maybe someday that we'll get a chance to either come and visit you, or if you're down in our way, please come and visit us. So.
Yeah, one day when we can do that, I'd be really take great pleasure in making a trip down there to meet you in particular. David's spoken very highly of you, so I look forward to that opportunity.
Very good.
And with that, thank you all for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you. We look forward to you hearing from us next week on the Working Tools Masonic Podcast. Goodbye.